Um, let's see. So, Vermonters Feeding Vermonters as a program that reached its peak capacity at COVID, or during the COVID period. And this grant program would not, increase the capacity of the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, but it would actually just allow it to stay at a level that it was at that time. Um, so that's why this bill is important, because otherwise that amount would decrease. So the amount that we'd be able to purchase locally would decrease if not for this bill. Offering this program through the Agency of Ag, I think, is helpful because they have familiarity with running other similar local producing or local purchasing programs such as Crop Cash or the Local Foods Incentive Grant. And they can also help with monitoring tracking of like who are we paying and how much food are we purchasing. And to track the economic benefit, I think, is helpful as well. And it's also a part of the food security roadmap tracking as to how far we're moving along in that process. I'm going to keep it brief because the real experts on this program are here with us today. And I think you'll have the opportunity to ask a lot of questions about how they would implement it through the Vermont Food Bank. But do you all have any questions for the general overview?
Senator O'Brien.
Just historically, during COVID, who administered it and where did the money flow from? Like some of it was ARPA or federal money?
So I had to. I had the same question about federal funding and wondering if any of it had been used previously to help us purchase more locally. And unfortunately, no. And correct me.
I'm sorry.
You can correct me if anything I'm saying is not completely accurate, but my understanding is no federal funds are being used to help the food bank purchase locally. So this is funded by two ways, which is state appropriation as well as philanthropy. So those two things combined, unfortunately, is all we have to allow this program to be sustained.
Did the food bank run the program then?
Yeah.
Senator Boston.
Could you just say a little bit more about like the breakdown of the kinds of produce or the kind of products that are available? Is it strictly produce? Is it value added? Is it cheese? Is it, granola? Like what kind of things can be purchased that are made within Vermont with this program?
The best people to answer this question would be the food bank themselves.
And if I can quickly introduce myself, I'm Carrie Saylor from Vermont Food Bank. The way the bill is written, it uses the definition of local that was put in statute that currently exists. So that is how the bill is crafted, to be very open.
Oh, yeah, on page 3 at the top of the page. And it's cool that we have someone here who has benefited and participated in these forward
Yes,
contracting agreements.
yeah, I just actually signed the contract, well, myself signed a contract with the food banks for this coming year with apples for
That's
Vermonters
great.
feeding Vermonters, yeah.
Yay. So we got some good insider perspective here.
Great program.
Other questions, just overall, top level questions for bill presenter. All right. And you did such a great job of explaining it. I think that there are no other questions.
Oh, of course.
Thank you.
Yes, and happy to chat anytime about it. But I'm excited to leave it in your hands now to do the.
Take it from here. You're welcome to stay, of course. I know you've got your.
I wish.
You work for.
I have to run across the hall. Thank you so much. It's so good to see you all. Goodbye. Thank you.
Ledge Council, Michael Grady, would you like to join us?
And so I will share my screen. And
Can I just ask John or Carrie a question?
Sure.
Yeah. So where does this fit in the sort of food banks work? You know, because it's
Can you
food
wait,
bank feeds Vermonters to begin with, right?
can you wait on that for our
Okay, I'll wait on
presentation?
it, sure.
That's a great question, though. We will talk about that.
Okay, thank you.
so I'm
Just leaving.
No, it wasn't you.
It wasn't.
Someone joins the Zoom, I mute them, but then they find.
all right.
Okay, hi, Mike.
Okay, this is Mike O'Grady with Legislative Council. Before I start walking through the bill, I want to give a kind of summary of what my understanding of how the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program has worked. Because I think it's important for some legal issues that might arise in this bill. And so it's my understanding that it's been run as a private program, that it wasn't required by the state to run this the way that it's been run. So it's may have been using state funds to purchase local foods or enter into contracts, but the state wasn't mandating that the food bank run a Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program. And I've gone back through the appropriations over the last 5-6 years to try to find where it says Vermonters. And there were bills and even a couple that passed the House where it said Vermonters Feeding Vermonters, but it didn't actually pass that way. It usually just wound up as a kind of a block grant to Vermont, to the Vermont Food Bank. That's important for a legal issue I'm going to point out in a minute. So you'll go to page 2. There's a finding section that addresses the fact that food insecurity in Vermont and across the country has increased, especially after COVID, that this increased access to produce improves health outcomes. For local food purchased from Vermont farms, every dollar spent contributes an additional 60 cents to the local community. Vermont Food Bank has been administering the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program since 2018, putting $9.5 million into the ag economy, and by purchasing over 5.7 million pounds of local food, supporting 299 farms in 2024. And the General Assembly should ensure the continued operation of the program by the food bank by establishing a great grant program at the Agency of Agriculture to provide ongoing annual appropriations to the program. So that's what section 2 does. It adds a subchapter in Title 6 in that economic development chapter at the Agency of Agriculture. It creates the specific Vermonters Feeding Vermonters grant program. It, as someone referenced earlier, it uses the definition of local foods in Title IX, which is a consumer protection title. That is a very, I want to say insular definition. It means only food from Vermont. And that's going to be important in a second. And then there is created in the agency that program to provide grants to Vermont Food Bank, to purchase local food directly from Vermont farms, to distribute through Vermont Food Bank's distribution channels, and offer sub-grants to Vermont's Food Bank's network partners to buy directly from smaller local farms or farm stands, and then Vermont Food Bank's partners that buy directly from small local farms with a focus on providing culturally preferred foods or local relationships. And the secretary reports annually to you regarding implementation of the program. The report includes the total amount of food purchased with grants from the program, the total number of farms purchased from, the total number of sites where food purchased from the program was distributed, and if there were grants or farm shares purchased, the total number of shares. And when the secretary reports, information regarding persons who receive benefits is going to be kept confidential. That's pretty standard in the Agency of Agriculture. And then you get to section 3, there's an appropriation in fiscal year 2026, 2 million appropriated from the general fund to the agency to implement the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters grant program. And the whole program will go into effect July 1 of 2025. Now, let's go back to the definition of local foods. It is specific and limited only to Vermont food. So that means it doesn't include any out-of-state food, which means it discriminates against out-of-state food. And it's a state program that discriminates against out-of-state food. So there's Commerce Clause provision, Dormant Commerce Clause that says when states regulate, they can't regulate it in a way that discriminates against out-of-state commerce. There's a couple of exceptions to that. One is when the state is acting as a market participant. It's when they are actually buying and selling things for themselves. They get to buy and sell and discriminate and choose who they want within reason, just like any private entity would. Then there's another exception is for subsidies, where the state can issue a grant to a subsidy just to people in the state or just a tax credit to people in the state, because that's been found to be within the state authority for a couple different reasons. But this isn't quite market participant. It isn't quite a subsidy because it's not just, hey, you get this money to buy local. It's, hey, you get this money to buy local and then distribute it and have that distribution potentially also discriminate against out-of-state commerce as well. And that has an issue because it's no longer a subsidy. It's about the regulation of the market. And so there's some concerns there. I think you can fix them pretty easily. And one way is to use some of the language that's been used in appropriations to the food bank in the past, or at least when the bills passed the house. It's not just for local food purchases, it's for farm viability, local food purchases, regional food purchases. And now you're not necessarily discriminating against commerce. Now you're not just focusing specifically on buying local food. Farm viability is not buying local food. You could have some purchases from New Hampshire, and that could be local. It's technically potentially local under the definition in Title IX if it's designated like as a region, but nobody's actually ever designated a region. So I think I could work with the food bank to kind of address those issues, because remember, this used to be a private program and private entities can buy and sell from whom they want. But now you have a state program using state funds to specifically discriminate against out-of-state goods, where it's not quite the state acting as a market participant. It's not quite the traditional subsidy, but I think we can form this so it eliminates those concerns.
Representative Burke.
So is the food bank currently a state entity or a private?
No, that's one of the first things I looked up. I wanted to know, are they a state? You're a 501c3, right? And so they're a private nonprofit. And normally you don't identify specific entities in law or for appropriations that are private entities. Normally it passes through a state agency, which this would do. But the food bank has gotten direct appropriations in the past. It has been named specifically in the past because of what it does and because it's good at what it does. And so, yeah, that was my first question. It's like, oh, if this is a state entity, we don't have a problem. This is just the state acting as a market participant.
Okay.
But it's not. It's a 501c3 independent. And now you're basically giving a grant to an independent to potentially discriminate against commerce. We can fix that. But I just wanted to raise that issue.
Representative.
Thank you. Define smaller firms.
It's not defined. There's going to be some discretion for the program to set some of its criteria, unless you want to set the criteria yourself.
Coming from a large firm in Vermont, not nationally, but in Vermont. I always have concerns when we start picking farms apart according to their acreage or size. Is Jasper Hill that makes cheese, are they a small farm versus someone that milks 50 cows and makes their own cheese?
But you can make an argument that Jasper Hill is both small and large.
Yeah, exactly. And they buy milk from other dairies as well.
Right.
And they also get cheese from other companies and store them in their wonderful cheese cage. So that's one example that came to mind. And
Right, but is the cheese cave a value-added accessory on-farm business, or is it part of the farm? And that's where you have to if they're just talking about the cows at Jasper Hill, the cows at Jasper Hill, it's a small farm. If you're talking about the whole operation and the processing is somehow value-added processing that becomes accessory on-farm business, it probably revenue-wise is going to be a medium to a large farm. And so I don't know Matea's business model well enough to figure out how he did that.
Representative Boston.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just wondering with the small local farm seems like strange language and hard to define. I almost wonder, I mean, if we end up taking up the bill, it's been introduced to us, we can leave that out. I mean, a local farm is, I think, the purpose, not necessarily a small one if they have 50 cows or 500 cows. I mean, I think we can work on that part because that does seem hard to define and maybe not helpful.
well, case in point, 2,200 mature cows, 5 acres of sweet corn. And if we wanted to hook up with a food bank and sell them sweet corn, are we a small farm because we only grow 5 acres of sweet corn, or we're a large farm because we're a large farm?
I mean, I think the idea is we don't want it to be giant multinational agribusiness or something, but I don't think we have it.
Well, we have right, exactly. But if we look at this language here, Mike, section B, there's below it number 1 and number 2. Can you just walk through that again?
Sure. So the money is at the Agency of Agriculture for a grant to the Vermont Food Bank to purchase local food directly from Vermont farms to distribute through the food bank's distribution channels.
That could be any size farm.
Yep.
It doesn't qualify the size there at all.
And to offer sub-grants to the food bank's network partners to buy directly from smaller local farms. So it's that when the food bank is issuing sub-grants, extending the reach of this program through subcontractors effectively, then it's going to be for smaller local farms or farm stands. And then last, the sub-grants to the food bank's partners that buy directly from small local farms with a focus on providing culturally preferred foods for local relationships.
All right, so it's making a distinction there, and we can certainly, delve into that a little bit more about why that might be useful, might be important.
Right. And I worked with a professor from Furman on the task force to revitalize the dairy industry, who's basically becoming one of the constitutional experts in the nation, especially for ag and environment. And I can ask him to like opine on this language if he would like.
Would be, yep. Be useful. Representative O'Brien.
Couple questions, Mike. One, is there any problem with the eligibility being solely with the food bank? Like if I'm a food authority, could I apply for this grant too, or is it really just goes through AAFM to the food bank?
That is normally you don't do this. You normally don't identify the specific grantee, but you have with the food bank. You've set precedent with the food bank. And so when I originally drafted it, I tried to draft it with a little bit of fluidity there, but there was some pushback on having it just to the Vermont Food Bank. And I think you can do either. I think you have history of just giving these grants, giving this money to the food bank for the purposes that the food bank operates. But you could open it up a little bit, make it a little bit more, I guess, generic of a term.
The other thing was on local, I can't remember, does this get into like, if the food bank was gonna make blueberry muffins with, Northeast Kingdom grains, but the blueberries were from Maine, does it get into that 50% ingredient thing?
Yeah. Let me put that definition on. It was totally like I drafted it, but I drafted it with the AG. And it got a little tortured, and you'll see how so.
Side A.
So there's some introductory definitions. I won't go over those. But then there's different categories for raw products. Local to Vermont means it was exclusively grown or capped in Vermont. Is not milk, was derived from an animal that was raised for a substantial period of its lifetime in Vermont. Is milk, where a majority of the milk was produced from Vermont animals, or is honey produced by Vermont colonists located exclusively in Vermont. For products that are processed food, local to Vermont means the majority of the ingredients are raw agricultural products that are local to Vermont, and the product meets one or both of the following. The product was processed in Vermont, or the headquarters of the company that manufactures the product is located in Vermont. So this was like, we had a situation where there was a Vermont manufacturer that their manufacturing plant was in New York. So they still qualify because their headquarters are in Vermont. And for bakery products, the majority of the ingredients are raw ag products that are local. Substantial transformation of the ingredients in the product occurred in Vermont, or the headquarters of the company that manufactures the product is located in Vermont. Again, there was a situation, there was a company that actually had its headquarters in Mass. It called itself the Vermont something company, but that's because it was actually making the products in Vermont, even though it was headquartered in Mass. And then you had the flip side. I think the Vermont Bread Company was headquartered in Vermont at the time. They're now in Indiana, but they were manufacturing outside of the state, but had a headquarters in the state. And this is all going back to why this was added is you probably don't know Elliot Berg. Elliot Berg was one of the consumer protection attorneys at the AG's office. And for years, he was kind of he had a mission to make sure that when Vermont products were represented as Vermont products, or products were sold saying that they were from Vermont, that they were actually from Vermont. And his best example were Japanese pancakes that said Vermont maple pancakes. And they were manufactured in Japan and never touched Vermont in any way, didn't use Vermont maple. And he had tons of examples like that.
Vermont curry was the other one.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's go back to the bill and I'll ask a question that may get to sort of the root of the matter. If we, on page 2, or sorry, page 3 at the top, rather than including local at all in on line 6, if we just said purchase food directly from Vermont farms.
I think,
Yeah, what would that unintended consequences would that be possibly?
I think you want to ask yourselves, do you want to specifically limit the state? Before that definition I just walked through, local meant within 20 miles of the state border. And so you didn't have this issue because local food was effectively regional food. And you could do something like that. Or you could say that the program's not just about purchasing food, it's about farm viability, which I think is largely it's partly what it's about, I should say. And then it's not about discrimination. It really is a subsidy, right? It's a subsidy program. You're like giving contracts to farms in Vermont to beef them up. That's kind of I think that's more the traditional subsidy program where you are giving money to entities in your state to support them. And that is not a Commerce Clause violation.
So if we just on line 6 there said purchase food directly from Vermont farms, I suppose that there could be repurchasing if the Vermont farms had bought it from someone else. That would be counter to the intent.
So one of the things I was thinking slightly different on that line, purchase food directly from local farms. And you don't define what local is. You give the food bank the discretion to define what local is. Maybe they want to buy some food from an orchard in New York, or maybe they want to buy some milk from, well, there aren't that any dairy farms in New Hampshire anymore, except maybe one you own. But so that kind of thing.
Okay, well, in any case, we need to do a little thinking on this, and when we hear from the food bank, that will help us with our thinking. Any other questions while we got the bill up for Mike? About the existing language. All right, it's a short bill, it's only 4 pages, so we can look at it on our own time again too. Good, thank you very much, Mike. So we've got John Sales and Carrie Stoller here, and Michelle Walls is also with us, I think. John, were you going to be? Did you want to come up next?
Yes, thank you. Oh, are you already?
I was gonna, are you already good?
I think so.
Yeah,
If I can have sharing privileges.
You do.
Okay.
And have you sent that presentation to me yet?
Marie, can you send that?
No. I got it. I think Mike just needs to unshare.
Oh, sorry.
That's good. Normally don't have so many computers trying to share at once.
It's a really exciting day in here.
There is.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee members. For the record, I'm John Sales. I'm CEO of the Vermont Food Bank. And fascinating, in a previous life, I was a lawyer, and just hearing about all the issues that come up from something that seems simple takes me back. So
Reminds you why you're not a lawyer.
it makes me want to dig into some of those issues a little bit, but I won't do that. what I like to do is really do a quick briefing on the food bank, just to give you an update. Some of this you'll have seen before, and I'll go through it quickly. And then talk a little bit more about our programs and our food distribution. That'll give you some context for the bill. And then Michelle's going to come up and is really our expert on Vermonters Feeding Vermonters as it's grown, and happy to answer any questions, of course. And just interrupt me along the way if something comes up. So about the food bank, our mission is to gather and share quality food, nurture partnerships so that no one in Vermont will go hungry. We are the only food bank who does what we do. We're a statewide organization. We have 3 distribution centers in Barre, Rutland, and Brattleboro. As you can see, we kind of split up the way we cover the state. There's some overlap there, particularly with Rutland and Brattleboro. Impact. So 72,000 people each month on average, and that's through our direct distribution programs, which I'll show you, and all of our 300 partners across the state that we work with. Last year, it was about 14.5 million pounds, and we're on track this year. Our fiscal year starts in October. We're on track this year to exceed that, to be closer to 15 million pounds. But 299 farms we purchased from last year, and those are Vermont farms. We do purchase from other farms out of state, which is something we can talk about. The Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program has always been about purchasing Vermont grown and Vermont raised food and distributing that through our network. We do purchase other food, and we bought 2.7 million pounds of produce from Canada last year. So there's a big grower up there, obviously big Western Harvest who we work with. And then the 215 network partners, those are the food shelves and meal sites in your communities, after school programs, senior centers, organizations that provide food.
Is that the grower in Granby?
Yes,
Yeah.
Western Harvest. Yeah.
Yeah, they're quite amazing.
Yes, they are.
They're quite amazing.
It was a number of years ago, but they came down and or a couple of our folks went up there for a visit, and they took them in their helicopter and flew around to see their grown.
Is that in Quebec?
Yeah.
Could you say a little bit about, I know you just said a number of the pounds again, can you repeat that?
2.7 million pounds we purchased.
2.7 million pounds, and that's out of 14 some total.
That's right.
A substantial percentage. What, can you just say what kinds of, what are you buying?
Oh, it's all fresh produce. It's all produce.
All kinds of
All produce. Yeah, nothing processed.
You can get tomatoes from them in May.
Yeah.
And they're perfect.
And they provide us with mixed loads. So we get a 40,000 pound trailer every Monday from them of mixed produce.
Are you paying market price for that?
Yes, we usually buy seconds. So we're paying, I think, an average of about 35 cents a pound, something like that.
Delivered?
Excuse me.
Delivered?
Delivered. Yes, they deliver. We pay, the transportation cost is separate, but they do deliver. The reason we buy from Quebec is because of delivery. Through our Feeding America network, we could buy produce from all over the country. We have access to brokers and growers, from Florida to Washington State, from, Southern California. But the transportation costs are enormous. And having a neighbor right across the border, it's much cheaper to bring it down. So where does our food come from? 3 main sources is the federal food. We run 2 federal food programs, and those are actually, the state technically runs those programs, and the state sub-grants the programs to the Vermont Food Bank. And that the CSFP is a food box that goes to Vermonters over 60 who are income eligible. And that's a direct distribution program. So the feds send us the food, we fill the boxes with volunteers, and they get delivered various ways across the state. And TFAP is USDA commodities, basically all kinds of food. It gets purchased by USDA and then distributed throughout the country. We get our share, and that goes mostly through food shelves and meal sites, gets distributed. our donated food, so local farms. We have a gleaning program, which Michelle also heads up. Corporate individual donations and food grower processor of any size really in Vermont is a donor. Through Feeding America, we also have access to national networks of donations. And so we can bring in food from, the big dogs, the Tysons and the ConAgras and General Mills and folks like that. There's a kind of a share system around the country where we can get access to some of that food. And then really the largest growing part of our food supply is purchased foods. So this program that we're talking about, purchasing Vermont foods from Vermont farms and producers. We also, Feeding America does bulk purchasing, so we can get very good pricing nationally buying through Feeding America. And we just go out there and shop too and buy local, both from Vermont companies, but often we're just out in the market. We're looking to get the most food we can for our dollar, for the quality parameters that we're looking for.
Representative Bunsen.
Can you just qualify, can you just say a little bit more what that means? Like what when you're talking about quality products, like, how much ultra processed food versus fresh produce versus.
Right. Well, for instance, when we buy canned vegetables.
Yeah.
We always go for low or no sodium.
Yeah.
When we buy canned fruits or frozen fruits, we're looking for something without any added sugar. So in natural juices. When we're buying pasta and rice, we're usually buying brown rice or whole wheat pasta. We want to make sure that we're getting the most nutritional food we can for our dollars. So where does that food go? As I said, the CSFP goes to income eligible adults over 60. That CSFP is also, or the TFAP is distributed through our network partners. It says 225. We actually have about 80 TFAP partners because as you'll see, there are requirements from the federal government for how federal food is distributed. So not everybody wants to access that. But then the donated food goes to all of our partner food shelves, meal sites, and community organizations. The Veggie Van Go, which is donated and purchased product, is our direct distribution that we do in partnership with schools and hospitals across the state. It's a drive-through. It's all produce and then some protein. We often have eggs and maybe some yogurt, dairy products, things like that. I don't know if you all are familiar with SASH, which is a Medicaid program run by Cathedral Square, support and services at home. So it's for elderly and disabled folks who are basically living in congregate living in senior housing. And the SASH program just helps them maintain their health, get them to doctor's appointments, make sure they're eating right, just support. And so we do produce drops at SASH sites, and then the SASH coordinators will distribute that food out to make sure that those low-income older adults and disabled folks have access to fresh vegetables. And then the backpack program, which actually over the next couple of years, we're going to be transitioning away from more to we have a whole master plan actually on serving kids in Vermont, and backpacks not the most efficient and effective. So we're going to be transitioning away from that, but we're still doing that for the next couple of years.
Representative Nelson.
Yeah, thank you. Hearing yesterday on the universal school meals and stuff. That backpack program, they kind of alluded to was tied in to, because of universal school meals, you're able to get funding for that backpack program, or better able to get funding for it?
No, there's really no direct connection between backpack and universal school meals. I mean, it's providing, more resources for those kids. And a lot of the kids that were getting backpacks may have been, or some of the kids getting backpacks may have been kids that weren't accessing those school meals, and now.
I think that's how they worded it, because of the way we identify now.
Right.
More kids are more families. It's an essential program.
The universal school meals is key to making sure that our kids have proper nutrition. I mean, so many kids who were eligible for the program were not taking advantage, and so many kids who weren't eligible and still needed it, and now everyone just gets fed.
And if I understand it right, at least up home, when they pack those backpacks, it's not just for the student that's there, it's for his little brothers and sisters at home.
That's right. That's how they get used, is by the whole family. And there are backpack programs that are not run by the food bank. So some schools do them and they organize them themselves, or local Kiwanis or Elks Club, or sometimes the parents get together and create one. So
Now, can you think of a downside to that?
there's no downside to getting food to kids who need it.
That's right.
Right. It's yeah.
John, going back to the left side of the slide there, the CSFP program, an income eligible adult, let's say a single adult, what's the income eligibility?
I have a slide for that. So it's different for all three programs. So you can see here the CSFP, and this is set in statute or in rule. It's 130% of the federal poverty level. And you can see the household sizes there. That's compared to the Three Squares Vermont. And then at the right, TFAP, we actually had the flexibility to set the TFAP level. And right before COVID, or as COVID was hitting, we wanted to get as many people as possible. So we changed the state plan to make it 300%, knowing that that would cover almost everyone who is coming to our distributions. And to get TFAP, a participant has to self-certify. They have to sign a form that we maintain for records for the federal government. So there is a way we keep track of whether folks are eligible for TFAP. I think that actually 300% number is changing a little bit. There's some new rules that just came out and saying
300 is the ceiling.
is the ceiling.
Yeah, they just reevaluated the rules in the USDA over the past 2 years.
So this just talks a little bit more about the state federal programs. I talked about TFAP and CSFP. We are the entity that we get passed through federal funding to do Three Squares application assistance. So we're the only statewide organization that does that. It's actually sitting down with folks and helping them fill out the application. The area agencies on aging, the community action agencies, they provide that service also. But we're the only statewide. We kind of fill in some gaps that those other folks aren't hitting. And then SNAP Education, again, this is another program that Michelle leads, we call it VT Fresh, and it's cooking demonstrations and nutrition education that we provide through our partners across the state.
John, what does that assistance look like? How do you provide that?
We have a text line and an 800 number. And if somebody is curious, they can actually we have a texting tool where you can go through and answer a few simple questions and see if you might be eligible. And then you can talk to one of our SNAP team, our Three Squares team, and they will talk you through it. And like I said, they'll actually sit down with you on the phone or on Zoom or at your kitchen table and help you fill out the application. And then go through and answer the questions when you get the confusing letters from AHS that you don't understand, or you need to reapply, or you need this documentation. So it's really full service.
Do you have any data on how that's utilized?
We do, and I'd be happy to get that for you. I don't have it with me right now. Unless you know. And then where does our food come from in percentage? About 60% is donated. We talked about the donated channels. And then 15 to 20% comes through TFAP and CSFP through the USDA. And as I said, we have at any time 85 partners who distribute TFAP because of the paperwork requirements. And also some of our partners don't like it when there's a shelf of food and people come in and they have to say to some people, you can't take that food. And so they don't want to have that kind of atmosphere in their food shelf, and so they don't run this. So let's talk about purchased food. I said that purchased food was an increasing part of as the need has gone up, the amount of donated food And the USDA food has not tracked those increases. So, and food banks across the country have been purchasing more food. This is not just in Vermont. So we're up close to 25% of the food that we're purchasing. And again, we're not displacing other food. This is just an increase in need, and we can't find that donated or government food to fill that gap.
John,
Yes.
when you purchase food, does the seller, the wholesaler, recognize you're the food bank and sometimes give you a discount of some sort?
Sometimes, but usually not. We're just buying on national markets. We buy through Cisco. A lot of those companies, Cisco's a good example. So we buy through Cisco. I don't think we get preferred pricing, but they make donations to the food bank. So a lot of times you'll create that relationship. And some food vendors will become donors, because and it's true with farms, certainly, and also true with manufacturers. This is really more of a COVID story, and we're Representative Cole was talking about this a little bit, that as the food bank was accessing those ARPA and CARES Act funds, we all remember the 1,000 cars at the airports and the big food distributions. And there was a lot of money coming into Vermont. And so we were coming in the legislature and getting some of that directed toward the food bank. And that was this really rapid increase in the amount of local food that we were purchasing. Especially at the beginning of COVID, farmers were hit really hard. All their commercial accounts, that was it, right? Restaurants, catering, food service, everyone closed down. And so the food bank actually stepped in and started doing some purchasing. And as we knew this money was available, we wanted to make sure that it was, first of all, that we're getting the folks that we're serving the best, freshest food, and the best food is Vermont food, right? And so we're directing purchases toward Vermont farmers and increasing those relationships. And that's really, too, where we started this. We talk about the sub-grants in the bill. We have what we call the mini grant program. So Michelle can talk about this more, but when we say small farm in there, what we mean is a farm that is too small for us as the food bank to deal with. So when we get food, we want pallet quantities, right, and delivered to our dock by a truck. And some of our smaller farms, they're doing CSA, they're doing farmers markets, and they're not producing that kind of quantities. And so it doesn't make sense economically for the food bank to be rolling trucks and sorting this food and redistributing it. And so we redistributed the money, and then your local food shelf will use those funds, go to a local farm and buy, 4 CSA shares. And then that food comes to the food shelf and gets distributed that way.
And that's what's happening right now.
That's what's happening right now.
So that the language that we were looking at in the bill is intended to reflect what's happening right now.
Correct.
Somehow capture that.
Correct. And I get to learn about all the legal nuances. So why maybe that's not the right language. Appreciate that. Just some quotes from our neighbors about the impact. It's a special thing that the food bank does. I know people who wait all month just for the Veggie Van Go and feel that sense of security, knowing that the food will be there in the fridge and on the table. A diabetic, and it's a diabetic diet is more expensive. You have to eat a lot more fresh food, and so this helps. And then, we're just there, and we're there consistently for our neighbors. And we hear a lot of appreciation. I really appreciate the fact that people are doing what they need to do to bring those ends together and to be active participants in their community and be healthy. And I think it's a lot of courage to ask for help and to accept it. And then you already had Dr. Niles came in and presented her study to you, and I'm not going to go over that again, but I'll just remind you of all that great data that she shared with you. And just wanted to, again, share one slide from her presentation, which is the food access challenges. And the red is the food insecure people, and the blue is the food secure. And really what I want this slide to show is it's all about money. right? Food insecurity is financial insecurity. Transportation, yes, and availability, yes, but it's really all about the money. It's not about meal planning or being able to cook or understanding nutrition. It's about whether you have the money to buy the nutritious food that your family wants and needs. And then I think this is my last slide. So just to understand the impact of natural disasters on food assistance. The blue line is 2023, and you can see the 2 flood events. We had huge peaks, huge spikes in food need and distribution, because when those things happen, we also often, but not as much lately, get spikes in resources. So food donations and financial donations, and we get those right out there in the community. And you can see too, in 2024, the same thing's happening. When we're having flooding, we're seeing a huge spike in need. And to remember that for families with low incomes, when there's, you're flooded out of your house, or you have damage, or you lose your car, it's a long tail to recovery, right? They don't just go out and get their insurance money and get a new car and go on as life is normal. It takes a long time to recover, to rebuild those financial resources.
We had a discussion last week, but a lot of families are one boiler blow up away from food insecurity, or major car breakdown and got to get the car fixed. So they can fall back, still have food, get their car fixed. They get their furnace fixed.
Right now, just up the hill there, 2 days ago, my furnace died. So I got electric space heaters going, and I had the contractor came this morning. I'm going to be okay, right? It's going to cost probably about $16,000 to replace my furnace. I'm going to be okay. What I thought about when that happened was, boy, what if I was one of the people that we're serving? It's not okay. And it throws you back for years.
Absolutely.
Right.
John, there must have been sort of a double whammy there too, with a lot of Vermont farms losing produce that would have gone to the food shelf, either as a purchase or as a donation.
Absolutely. And Michelle can talk more about that. We've worked with a lot of farmers, and we actually had farmers who we had contract with who lost their crops. And then we had to shift to other places. It was particularly acute with the Intervale, because we had some farms there. First of all, there were some subsistence farmers, New Americans, and also farms there that were growing the culturally relevant foods that we were distributing to certain communities, and we lost all of that, and it was hard to find replacements for that. So just to remind you, this is all about systemic policy choices and systems that aren't working, and that the state of Vermont can make policy choices to make us more food secure. If you look at the roadmap, we have a roadmap for how to be food secure in 10 years. And in the meantime, the food bank can help fill that gap in the short term. And then finally, again, to remind you, the food bank seeking a total of $5 million in the FY26 budget, $1.75 million for responsive readiness through the Vermont Emergency Management, and then $3.25 million for food purchase and distribution. And the $2 million in this bill would be part of that $3.25 million. I just talked about that. We want to make sure we're ready for the challenge, for the next disaster, and then purchase and distribution.
Yeah, John, could you just go back to the responsive readiness? Sure. So talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. So, we've been performing this service for a long time, right? When there's a flood or an ice storm or a disaster, people lose the food that they have or get flooded out of their homes. And, we're there already, right? Because our partners are affected too. So for instance, I forget which flood it was. The Montpelier Food Pantry got flooded out, and they lost everything. And they set up a temporary, I think in a parking lot with tents, food pantry, and we came in and provided food to replace what was lost and to make sure they had what was there to distribute. So that happens all over the state. When folks have disasters and it makes, impacts their food readiness or their food ability to feed themselves and their families, we come in and help feed them. We also get called by the state on occasion because the state doesn't have the resources or can't get it quickly. So the idea here would be that we would have food, emergency boxes, and operational capacity in our trucking. We have pallet slots available for food to come in, and all that costs money. To have an empty pallet slot to us costs money, and so we're asking the state to give us a base appropriation so that we will be ready. We'll have pallets of water. We'll have pallets of emergency boxes. It won't be a week before we close.
Does FEMA ever reimburse 501c3s for that sort of disaster stuff, or does it have to be a municipality that?
So there are some food banks that operate in a way around the country that do get some FEMA reimbursement. We've never been able to crack that nut here. So we've never gotten any FEMA reimbursement for work.
Would it make sense then for some towns like Montpelier to be a municipality that's running their food shelves, so that then they're eligible?
But then they have the challenge of dealing with, as we've seen, the town by town, dealing with FEMA town by town doesn't really work very well.
And you need a grants manager to begin with.
So thank you.
Right, any questions? And are we gonna hear next from Carrie? Or Michelle? Okay, all right.
I just.
Okay, yeah. Before we turn it over to Michelle, are there any other questions for John?
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
All right, yes, and Michelle, I think this is it's your first visit to the committee this year.
Mini visit, yeah. The last time might have been 19 years ago.
Okay, well, the committee has changed an appearance since then, probably more than once, but just so you know who we are, but we'll do a quick round of introductions since this is your first time in. First.
Sure, Heather Supnant, I represent Windsor 4, Barnard, Pomfret, Bridgewater, West Hartford.
Right, perfect.
We know each other.
Michelle Boslin, Wyndham 3, which is Westminster, Rockingham, and Brookline in northern Wyndham County.
Richard Nelson, Orleans 1, Derby.
Chad Lipsky, Mile 1, South.
Dylan Morgan, I represent Grand Isle County and the western portion of the town of Milton.
David Durfee, I represent Shaftesbury and part of Sunderland and Glastonbury in Bennington County.
Some really nice representation. It's cool state, nice. I'm gonna try to figure out how to share my screen here. There we go.
That's Sodonia. She's our expert on everything.
Everything.
There you got it. Success.
Great.
Could we close the shade a little bit on that side? It's hard for me to see.
Well, thank you for having me here. For the record, my name is Michelle Wallace. I'm the Director of Community Health Programs at the Vermont Food Bank. I've been at the Food Bank for almost 13 years, and I direct the Vermonters Feeding Vermonters program, which I helped to establish in 2018 and have continued to support the expansion and growth of the program since. This slide deck will give you a lot of some good information about the program, but will also, I think, help you connect with really how impactful it's been. All of these photos are from our community partners, network partners who are distributing the local Vermonters, feeding Vermonters food we purchase. So the guiding principles for the program, oh, here we go. So Vermonters Feeding Vermonters provides fresh, local, nutritious food to people facing hunger, strengthens the state economy, provides security to Vermont farmers, and reduces our environmental footprint. You know, I can change the slides, all right. And our guiding principles, we believe that everyone in Vermont deserves equitable access to fresh, local, nutritious, and culturally meaningful food. Neighbors see better health outcomes if they have access to and eat fresh, local food. Farmers have more financial security when they can count on purchases of food through this program. Our food system is strengthened and our economy benefits when we keep our food dollars in state rather than purchasing food elsewhere, and our environmental footprint is reduced because the food is sourced locally. So how do we do this? These are our guiding goals and strategies. So we're dedicated to purchasing a diversity of fresh, nutritious, locally produced food. If we just wanted to check a box, we could just buy potatoes and apples and be like, we buy Vermont. And that's not the case. We are buying a very significant diversity of crops through this program, which I'll go into detail. We also recognize how important it is to work with a variety of sizes of farms of different scales across the region of the state. So we're very dedicated to doing that. We're committed to paying a fair price to farmers. We are not asking for a discount. We provide farmers with large-scale contracts that provide them with increased security of predictable sales, volume, and prices. But we're also really committed to being flexible and responsive to the needs of Vermont farmers. So an example of this would be the floods of last year. One of our largest producers, Jericho Settlers Farm, she lost all of her carrots and all of her beets. We were able to buy tomatoes and zucchini instead from her greenhouse. We've had farmers lose winter squash crops down south due to dry conditions, and we were able to buy a root vegetable instead. We've been able to pivot and respond to unpredictable seasonal variations that happen and be able to keep that contracted sale with farms. It's been harder with the apples. That huge freeze that you had a couple of years ago affected many of the growers we worked with, and we ended up not being able to find another crop in that situation. But we try to be very flexible and responsive, and this has been one of the things we've heard from farmers is one of the greatest strengths of the program. As John mentioned, we also provide these mini grants. So mini grant funding to the food bank partners so that they can build relationships locally and purchase from the local farm stand, the farmers market, get that CSA share. And we also are seeking out creative partnerships to reach our BIPOC communities, farmers and community members who may be disadvantaged or underserved. And so we have 3 arms of the program. Skip a bunch of slides. But let me just go over some of the data points first. So this is so you can see the spending on Vermont local fresh food since 2018 through Vermonters Feeding Vermonters. Right now, our 2025 budget is $2.3 million in food purchases. And, you know, we're really here today because we really need state funding in order to maintain this. We are projecting for 2026 that the program will likely have a significant cut to the budget of our food purchasing dollars without a state appropriation. We just wouldn't be able to maintain that 2.3 million. This is the number of farms participating annually since 2018. You can see the exponential growth. And this has really come about because of the mini grants that we've been able to allocate to our local partners. They're able to work with, there's so many, you know, mixed agriculture, smaller farms throughout the state that our partners can work with that, you know, John mentioned, it just doesn't have that capacity to bring in pallet loads on a truck to our food bank warehouses, but we want to engage anyways. And these are the number of crops that we've been purchasing, both direct, this is a combination of direct purchases as well as what our partners are purchasing. So as you can imagine, there's a huge diversity here. You know, cilantro shows up on the list here, and strawberries and blueberries, and some of the more storage crops as well, for sure.
Well, could you go back to that slide, Michelle, for a second? Excuse me for interrupting. That's TFAT food. You see big cases of the same. Folks who can take unlimited self-serve from the produce can't necessarily take that.
That's a great photo. That's from FoodWorks in Brattleboro. There's photo credits on each of these, but they're really, really, I think, our partners are so proud of being able to distribute this food that we have hundreds and hundreds of photos. It's really hard to choose when it comes to share. So this is the overall program impacts annually at this point. For last year, we had $2.38 million in food purchases that represented about 1.4 million pounds, about 299 farmers across all 14 counties. And the estimated contributions to the Vermont economy for every dollar you spend in Vermont, the UVM Center for Rural Studies said that, that adds an additional 60 cents to the Vermont economy. That study is a little bit, it's before COVID. I don't have a more recent study, but I kind of imagine the contribution might have increased actually since that study was done. And so the three arms of the program, which, are really referenced in that bill, we're doing this large scale wholesale purchasing of pallet quantities. So coming into our warehouse, these are the contracts that were mentioned. We have the mini grants to the partners, and then we have CSAs of culturally responsive food. So this is just a sort of a glance at what wholesale purchasing looks like. We're buying from over 22 large scale farm partners. That number, so we buy from three food aggregators, Food Connects, Deep Brew, and the Intervale. And collectively between those three, they're working with about 15 producers. So really our large scale wholesale pallets of vegetables that are coming in are really coming from approximately 34 to 37 different larger scale farms. That represents 39 types of produce. This is a huge accomplishment for the food bank. When I started 13 years ago, we had the 4 or 5 that we distributed at the food bank: potatoes, cabbage, carrots, I think beets and apples. I think those are 4 or 5. Onions, not beets, onions, yeah. And so now we're distributing 39 types and a variety of protein and dairy, going to hundreds and being distributed amongst hundreds of partnering organizations, meal sites, food shelves, Veggie Mango, schools and hospitals, and SASH partners, as John mentioned. I also have pages and pages of quotes from farmers, as well as some surveys that we've done. I think the take-home message though here for our largest scale producers is that this program has added so much stability to a very unstable experience of just as inevitable in farming. Those forward-facing contracts have helped them do so many things to increase farm viability for their own business. But the thing that really has struck me that is the pride to be a part of this program and the acknowledgement that the food that they're growing would not have a channel, would not have a way to getting to Vermonters who are food insecure without this program. And we've heard that from every single 100% of the growers that we work with. And then these are our largest growers. We're talking Harlow Farm, we're talking the partners at Deep Brew, we're talking Champlain Orchards, Jericho Settlers Farm. They're saying to us that without this program, we wouldn't be selling as much food in Vermont. This would have to go out of state. We just wouldn't have a market to keep this food here. And so it really makes a difference to be able to keep the food in Vermont.
Jennifer.
So that picture that might be our apples in the bottom. That's our box.
Those are your apples. Nice. Those are nice apples.
Representative Lipsky.
Michelle, on the very first slide that you opened with was a group of peaches and lookers left corner. You don't need to go back to that. My question is, are you sourcing all the peaches you need from Vermont growers?
So peaches are a great example of a product that we wouldn't buy at pallet quantities in our warehouse, but our partners through the mini grants would be purchasing those. And so those peaches are from down south in the Brattleboro area. I think they're either from Scott Farm or there's a peach farm down outside of Brattleboro. But they're able to buy boxes, couple boxes.
But they're grown.
Yes.
I bought, advocated on farm stands. Far away, there are a lot of Pennsylvania peaches. They're not grown in Vermont, but they're purchased.
Yeah, you're way up north, you said, right?
Well,
Okay, yeah, I
it's
mean,
a strong connection.
oh, yeah. The climate's changing, so we're starting to see a decent peach in central Vermont, but the peaches down south in Brattleboro, like, you feel like you're in a different climate, so, it's like the banana belt, it's, yeah, they're quite good.
I take it the citrus didn't come from.
Does that picture have citrus in it?
Yeah.
We're gonna go back.
See citrus, but.
Yeah. One of the-
One of the pictures.
Eggs are not citrus.
No, there's another picture
Okay,
that showed,
oh, this one
yeah,
here,
that one.
okay. This is a picture from our partners, yeah, you're right. So maybe not all of the product in this photo.
Well, it's more important that you're serving a well-rounded variety of foods and, buy local what you can. I wouldn't expect bananas to be from Vermont either, so.
Sharp eyes, though. I didn't catch the citrus, so thank you. So our wholesale purchasing from Vermont farmers. So we are hearing that, they feel like they're receiving a reasonable price, the stability. What we've heard from a number of farms, though, too, they've been able to hire additional staff because of this program. They've been able to increase acreage. They've been able to make some equipment purchases to increase efficiencies. So examples of this would be like Jericho Settlers Farm was able to increase like 30% of their wholesale accounts because of working with the food bank. They were able to invest in equipment that enabled them to then open up accounts with other distributors. Laughing Child Farm also was able to double their acreage. They grow sweet potatoes and really expand their wholesale market. We do work with those mostly larger farms, but we do work with some like 5 or 10 acre farms who are, trying to kind of like scale up and enter the wholesale market. Woods Market outside of Rutland is a big example of that. The farmer is a new farmer who bought a farm that had been there for 40 or 50 years. He's really wanting to expand his wholesale presence. And so working with us is helping to do that.
Nelson.
Thank you. Do you have capability to store, like here you're showing the squashes and potatoes and stuff? You have the capability to store those throughout the winter months for distribution throughout the
That's a
winter?
great question. We rely on our farm partners to do that. And that's been another positive outcome of this program is that, so we really need Vermont product as late as we can into like the early spring, so May or April. And so we've had farmers improve their storage capabilities so that they can keep the product for us and now also for others of those root vegetables. A lot of our contracts are storage crops. It's the root veggies and it's also the winter squash, which is an incredibly stabilizing factor. What we've heard from our partners at the Intervale is that that stuff is actually fairly easy to grow. There's a lot more variability in terms of weather impacts of things like broccoli or cauliflower, things like that. So this large scale purchase of a root crop that can be stored has given them a reliable sale and encouraged longer storage than they otherwise used to, an investment in that.
You take a 30-yard pile of compost and a pack of markup squash seed and spread them out there. I got squash enough for the whole town of Derby. Don't know what to do with it. I don't have a good way to store it.
Yeah. Storage, I think, is a critical piece of the puzzle here for community food security in Vermont. Champlain Orchard is a great example. We've become one of their largest customers. They've told us, and that also has helped them take another step forward in that basically being able to provide a Vermont apple 12 months out of the year. Their storage capabilities there are pretty astounding. So we feel really proud about that because this is a program that has a very targeted benefit for folks who otherwise wouldn't have access to food, but it also benefits everyone. It provides food security, community food security, strengthens our local food system and farm viability, as already mentioned.
Give it time to go about 10 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to go through the rest very quickly here. So then we have our mini grants. We have 156 partners receiving about $500,000 of funding. What's been really cool is the majority of them are spending additional funds with their local farms, another $300,000 of their own funds that are sourced elsewhere. And then we've seen that reciprocal relationship of donations increasing from the farms. Our partners can, we work with about, like I said, between 22 directly and 37 total of those large wholesale contracted farmers. Our partners are working with 281 farms. And they're sourcing 76 different crops. We're sourcing about, I think I said 27. This is really building community. It's building connection between the farmer and the local food shelf, the senior center, the meal site, the congregate housing community in a really beautiful way, like really deepening relationships that have been really meaningful. I think what the strength here is that we have these systems in place. Really, the piece is the funding, but all of the systems, the infrastructure, the people, the staff, the volunteers, all of it, it's like almost like seamlessly working to a certain degree now. The funding piece to be able to just pay the farmer, have this funding go directly to the farmer for their food purchases is the critical piece of the puzzle that you're going to hopefully help us figure out. And so our community grant partners, I think you can imagine the benefits, but the opportunity to have fresh local food, weaving the community together, supporting all parties. Local providers need the income, local people need the quality food. It's vital to our rural community. Just some quotes here. This one's really wonderful quote. Vermonters Feeding Vermonters is a wonderful program that has benefited our food shelf and our community. Not only does it allow us to provide high quality fresh foods to our clients while simultaneously supporting local farms. The VFV program also connects our food shelf, both our volunteers and our clients, with our neighbors who operate local farms. The forging of connections within the community has made a genuine difference for our food shelf, our clients, and our farm partners. The VFV program creates what is best described as a virtuous circle, where not only all the individuals involved are better off, but the community is as well. So something I was trying to speak to, say it much more eloquently. The VFE program is a wonderful idea, well executed. Our community is grateful for it. These are some quotes from local farmers. I also have pages and pages of testimonials of just how meaningful it is to be able to have their food go to their neighbors, be able to keep it local, to be able to get that fair price. It just makes it really, really meaningful for folks and really helps with their farm viability and farm business.
I think I know who the middle farm is.
Which one do you know?
Heather,
Heather?
she's a weapon.
Oh, farmers are the most resilient people, as you have to be. And then the third arm of the program is we recognize that there are members of our community who there's more diversity in Vermont, new Americans, migrant farm workers, folks who we can connect to and reach with food that's specifically grown with their food preferences, their cultural food preferences in mind. It's not a huge part of the program, but we are working with farms to grow CSA shares, boxes of food that have specific culturally responsive, culturally preferred foods being grown and distributed in the local community. And so here's a list of just some of those projects that are happening. And a quote from our Susu community farm partner, community-centered agriculture, food as medicine, deepening our members' connection to the land. fostering self-sufficiency, cultural reclamation, and a quote from our partner in Manchester. They did a really great program. They partnered with the library for English language learners, migrant farm workers who are new to the community, and were able to combine food with like sort of, you know, a space to welcome new members to the community during one of these classes. So that's my story of the program. It's been very successful. It's something that there's a lot of pride at the Vermont Food Bank for this program, but I think it's that scope of reach and that impact across the entire state that has even astounded us. And it's really it's about getting the resources to the very, very small communities throughout Vermont and basically getting out of the way so that those relationships can be built, strengthened, and that food can be distributed to people in need, our neighbors right there, close to where the farms are.
There's a quote from a farm stand, a couple of slides back. So some of the distribution would be through not necessarily a food shelf, but directly from a farm stand.
Not through this program, but these are farmers who sell the food to the food shelf or meal site. Mm-hmm. And then the food shelf partner, the volunteer, the staff member might be going to the farm stand to make that purchase. And, you know, one of the things that's really critical, so a lot of our smallest partners might only get a delivery from the food bank once a month of fresh produce because they're geographically, we don't have the ability to go more than that. And they're too far from one of our warehouses to come and get deliveries. This has greatly expanded just the offering, just the existence of fresh produce in those spaces has now become very common and operationalized as very much something that people are expecting and can depend on.
So this isn't related to your exact PowerPoint, but it was referenced earlier that you do sort of education programs for folks. How do you take produce and make healthy food with it? Can we just talk about that a little bit? Because that's a strong interest area of mine. I actually work with youth doing similar things in the Brattleboro area.
Yeah, so through our VT Fresh program, I've been working with a team of folks since about it might have been 2008, 2009. And we really started from a place of working with our food shelf partners to think about how to transform the food environment to make fruits and vegetables more predominant, more available, more accessible, but beautifying the space, you know, and with signage and like thinking about how to make it more appealing so that the healthier choice is the easier choice. So we started from that place and we incorporated like very, very simple cooking demos, which really show up kind of as taste tests, as meeting people where they're at in the moment. And using recipes, our VT Fresh recipes all just have one fruit or vegetable as the primary ingredient, giving folks an opportunity to taste it. And then that product is right there with that simple recipe. The recipe's written, but the spirit of it is it's as simple as it can possibly be that we could just tell you how to do it, you know? It wouldn't have to be followed.
Do you have access to that? Like, is on your website? Could we go and look and see what are the recipes you've used for those programs?
All the recipes. We have the strategies. This year, we have 126 partners who have signed up to basically implement different components of VT Fresh, whether it be working on displays and signage or doing cooking demos. We've also now started doing recipe kits, which are like bundled ingredients that people can take home with them, everything they need. We also have some partners who are doing some really interesting community-led like equity projects, addressing barriers around transportation, people are homebound, language barriers. So doing a different sort of strategies to make fruits and vegetables accessible by addressing some of those barriers.
Do you use it all the Harvest of the Month program through Food Connects in terms of featuring certain types of produce or not necessarily?
Their materials are beautiful up on the wall there, the calendar. Yeah. So that's one of the things we encourage our partners to, display and utilize. So that's one of the resources. This is one of the resources we created, a quick tips booklet.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we will, if we move forward with with H167, we may reach back out to the food bank for some testimony. And then separately, as far as the budget request, we may have got questions about that too. So, and I realize that they're not separate, but part of the same thing. Thank you very much. I think we should probably take a break. So